Assalamualaikum. My name is Aidil bin Abdul Jalil from BA2423B, and today I will present about the history of Malaysia Ringgit and Great Britain Dollar in 2018. First of all, I will start with the history of Malaysia Ringgit. The value of Malaysia Ringgit in 2018 is variety, which is fluctuate, and this is happen due to many factors such as external factor and also internal factor. Next, in 2018, the best situation or value of Malaysia Ringgit compared to the Great Britain Dollar is 0.18302, while the worst or bottom value of Malaysia Ringgit compared to the Great Britain Dollar is 0.18156. Meanwhile, the closing value Malaysia Ringgit compared to the Great Britain Dollar is 0.183. Next, Malaysia Ringgit against Great Britain Dollar in 2018 is appreciate, and this can be proved by Malaysia Ringgit go from 5.460 to 5.269. The appreciation of Malaysia Ringgit happened because of Bank Negara Malaysia take an incentive, which is conversive policy, where it resulting Malaysia Ringgit stronger and weakening foreign currency such as USD dollar. Next, I will continue with the history of Great Britain Dollar in 2018. First of all, Great Britain Dollar also very fluctuate and variety due to many external factors. Due to the fall of Great Britain Dollar in 2016, the value of Great Britain Dollar reached the lowest in its history, which is 1.433 in 2018. In 2018 also, the opening of Great Britain Dollar against USD is at 1.344 and it closed at 1.274, which is show Great Britain Dollar appreciate.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Akmal Fahmi bin Muhammad Zamri. So as for this part, I will be explaining about the history of Malaysian Ringgit in 2019. So as we all know that it has been a tough year for Ringgit in 2019. So when the United States Federal Reserve's FED turned dovish at the beginning of the year, it gives way to a slew of external risks. So during that time, a local currency has decided to trade in a 55-point range. So while the Federal Reserve's monetary easing this year boosted the appeal of risk-based assets as United States Treasury yields fell, protracted trade tensions between Washington and also Beijing kept the Malaysian currency vulnerable to trade-related headlines. So for your information, Malaysia is like an export-oriented economy, but in this case, it was being portrayed as one of the losers in this scenario because of the lack of domestic catalyst and because Malaysia has a lot of political uncertainty going on, which keeps it vulnerable to foreign outflows. Okay, so basically I've already explained about the history of Malaysian Ringgit in 2019. So we are going to move on to the history of British Pound Sterling or GBP in 2019. So basically Brexit became one of the most enormous challenge for British Pound Sterling in 2019. So basically the pound The pound itself, it began its first day in 2019 0.8% higher compared to during the Christmas Eve. So however, the pound become under pressure due to the parliament return and the Brexit debate resumed. So when Boris Johnson was appointed as the new leader, it somehow boosted the pound. Okay, so basically what I'm trying to say that the pound fluctuated in response to and indications of the outcome with the political developments and negotiations. So basically the European has made optimistic comments about the feasibility of Brexit. So in September, President Jean-Claude Juncker boosted the pound. Okay, so the rising of the pound by an average of 2.7% against the other major currencies was caused by the news of detailed and constructive talks between Prime Minister Theresa May and also the Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar. So basically the pound began running out of steam by November and the market was bracing for a general election. And I think that's all for the history of GBP in 2019.
Hi, my name is Nur Hidayah. I will share you about the history Malaysia in 2020. As we all know, in 2020, the currency rate is fragile due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Due to the obvious ongoing depreciation of the US dollar and the reopening of the economy, the Malaysian ringgit has risen to an average of RM4.20 per dollar. Less than a year, the ringgit has gained more than 4.94% against the US dollar. Next, we move to the Great British Dollar in 2020. Britain's impact has been influenced by the coronavirus as well as the country's terrible economic outlook. Great British Dollar currency has recovered slightly, rebounding approximately 1.102 after hitting low at 2018. It is increased 0.3% to 1.35 per dollar, having risen as high as 0.9% earlier. Since the end of June, the currency has recovered about 10% of its value, and the relative cost of hedging pound weakening over the next year has increased. As the business reopened to some extent in May, the Bank of England has begun to reduce its bond buying program, allowing the pound to hold on to profits achieved earlier in the month.
Now, I will continue with the interaction between Malaysian ringgit and Great Britain dollar in 2018. The maximum number, which is the lowest value of Malaysian ringgit compared to the Great Britain dollar, is RM5.567, while the minimum number, which is the highest value of Malaysian ringgit compared to the Great Britain, is RM5.207, and the average is RM5.387. The year of 2018 is a recovery year of Malaysian ringgit, and this can be shown by initiatives that are being implemented by Bank Negara Malaysia, such as capped local currency, which lead into positive domestic development. Based on the graph, Malaysian ringgit appreciate against Great Britain dollar, and it can be shown by the opening Malaysian ringgit compared to the Great Britain dollar, which is 5.463, and the closing is 5.217.
So as we can see right here, so basically this is the graph that we have generated from the website based on the British pound sterling and the Malaysian ringgit in 2019. So basically, as we can see from the beginning of the year, so the Malaysian currency against GBP shows a trend of increase and decrease with no drastic changes. So starting from May 2019, we can see that the Malaysian currency is slowly appreciating as the trend of the graph is decreasing until the end of July. So the minimum value after year is RM 5.0090 per GBP on 30 July 2019. So then the currency began to depreciate slowly after that and reaches the maximum value of RM 5.6017 on 12 December 2019. So after reaching the maximum value, the currency began to play around on the range of RM 5.3 to RM 5.4. So when the pandemic hits in early 2020, and then the average value is RM 5 ringgit 0.3054. So even though just by looking at the trend, so there is no signs of appreciating anymore at the end of 2019. But okay, so but the performance is not as bad as compared to what happened in 2015, where 1 GBP equals to RM 6.7037. It means that the currency is depreciating drastically at that time.
Now I will continue the interaction between Malaysia ringgit and Great Britain dollar in 2020. The ringgit has a volatile 2020 with its value falling throughout a year. This graph depreciation of the Malaysia ringgit currency versus the British pound sterling GBP. The strongest ringgit in 2020 is about RM 5 ringgit and 07 cents against 1 Great British dollar, which is somewhere weaker than in 2019. But the greatest depreciated value of Malaysia ringgit in 2020 is RM 5 ringgit and 56 cents against 1 Great British dollar, which is the highest of the 3 years. The average value of the Malaysia ringgit versus the Great British dollar for the year 2020 is about 5.38 ringgit.
Next, Muhammad Zarif bin Suhaimi, will present about the factors that influence the performance of MYR against GBP from 2018 to 2020. For 2018, the first factor is global trade development. Trade has been a part of economic development for centuries. It has the potential to be a significant force for reducing global poverty and helping countries to acquire new technologies. Next, crude oil price movement. As the real value of GBP increased, the price of crude oil decreased accordingly. Other than that, emerging market chaos. The British pound is behaving like an emerging markets currency due to Brexit and liquidity conditions. Lastly, Brexit uncertainty. Businesses won't be able to rely on cheap labor and it may need to invest more on apprenticeship and existing new employees. For 2019, there are also several factors that influence the performance of MYR against GBP. Firstly, lack of domestic catalysts. Second, prevailing political uncertainties. Third, the escalated between US and China war has affected the pound sterling to fall. Fourth, interest rate differentials. Other than that, the UK's new Prime Minister Boris Johnson has forced the countries to exit Euro by October 2018 with or without agreement. And lastly, geopolitical uncertainties and commodity volatility. In 2020, there are also a few factors that influence the performance of MYR against GBP. First and foremost, the falling of gross domestic product, or known as GDP, in United Kingdom. The preliminary of GDP have the biggest impact because it gives the traders a first look into the economic health of the United Kingdom. Second, the manufacturing activities in Southeast Asia has been declined. The COVID-19 pandemic has marked the end of era in Southeast Asia's combined oil and gas production. Next, political and economic headwinds have struck the Malaysian ringgit. With a new shaky government in place, the Perikatan Nasional Administration have to navigate and managing the state finances. Lastly, social distancing and lockdown caused by COVID-19 by both Malaysia and United Kingdom. That's all from me. I will pass to the next presenter.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Atira Amini binti Rahmat, and I'm going to present recommendation and suggestion. First, sell foreign exchange asset and purchase on currency. If Malaysia sell GBP treasury bills and bring the money back to Malaysia, the GBP may depreciate. As a result, the Malaysian ringgit will appreciate over time. GBP supply would rise while Malaysian ringgit demand would increase. Second, make export more competitive. Export will be more competitive as the Malaysian ringgit weakens, since global investor and buyer demand goods and services. Increased sale help in strengthening of currency such as oil. Third, encourage economic growth. Government incentive for small medium entrepreneurs, a campaign to encourage people to buy local product and rise in the duty on imported goods and services. For example, when a government imposes an import tariff, it adds to the cost of importing the specific goods and services. Tariffs are frequently used to safeguard domestic startup businesses and industries from international competition. Number 4, increase interest rate. Higher interest rate increase the cost of borrowing, reduce disposable income, and therefore limit the growth in consumer spending. Higher interest rate tend to reduce inflationary pressure and cause an appreciation in the exchange rate. And lastly, make the country a more desirable place to invest. Given Malaysia's strategic location in the international trade route, with an open, diversified economy, the government has been a consistent proponent in encouraging quality foreign direct investment into the country. And now I will end the presentation with the conclusion. In the conclusion, based on the graph observation made for the past 3 years, it can be concluded that Malaysian ringgit began slowly depreciate towards the end of 2020. The currency significance because of exchange rate or the price of one currency in terms of another helps to determine the country's economic health and, as a result, the well-being of all its citizens. With the global crisis going on like the COVID-19 pandemics, many countries are struggling to make sure the stability of their financial and economic growth. Thank you.